Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast, where we explore the transformative power of prayer. Have you ever felt like your prayers were just hitting the ceiling and not reaching the presence of God? Welcome to the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast, a podcast about becoming 1% better every day. And now your host, yours truly, Clarence Stowers. Welcome and lean in, listeners. Today, we're doing something we like to call a deep dive. Now, you might be wondering, what in the world does that mean? Well, imagine you're at the beach, right? You could dip your toes in the water, maybe splash around a bit, and call it a day. That's fine. But sometimes you want to strap on those goggles, grab your snorkel, and plunge head first into the depths to uncover hidden treasures. That's what a deep dive on our podcast is all about. We're taking a topic, like we did earlier with prayer, and really exploring it from every angle. Remember those pesky distractions we talked about, like the food focus or the autopilot amen? Those are like little waves that keep us from going deeper in our prayer lives. And sometimes we approach topics in the same way. We skim the surface, but we don't always take the time to really understand the nuances and complexities. Think about our podcast show notes. We give you an overview, which is like a quick glance at the surface. But the episode highlights, that's where the real treasure is. We break things down, offer insights, and give you practical takeaways that you can actually use. That's the deep dive in action. So, how do we actually deep dive on the show? Let's say we're talking about prayer, like we did earlier. We might crack open the good book. We might analyze a passage like Genesis 18, where Abraham gets into some serious negotiations with God about Sodom and Gomorrah. Talk about a bold prayer. We'll unpack the historical and cultural context, like why hospitality was such a big deal back then, to understand why Abraham's actions were so significant. Get practical. We'll give you actionable steps to overcome those prayer distractions we talked about. We'll talk about how to build a consistent prayer life and how to approach God with confidence, even when things feel impossible. It's about going beyond the surface, asking tough questions, and wrestling with the deeper meaning. We want to equip you to think critically and engage with these ideas in a meaningful way. Because let's face it, life's too short for shallow waters. So, buckle up, listeners. Get ready to explore the depths with us as we take a deep dive into today's topic. You won't want to miss it.
All right, so we're diving into this pray big, expect bigger concept. And I'm not going to lie, the title alone has me picturing like yelling at the sky for favors.
It's funny you should say that because this source really gets into the nitty-gritty of prayer in a way that I think a lot of us can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. They had this bit called Funny Things Happen During Prayer. And honestly, I felt so seen.
Really?
Yeah, like the sleepy head nod during evening prayers, guilty. Or trying to remember if I need onions while I'm saying grace. It's like, come on, brain focus. But it makes you wonder if you're really connecting.
That's so real, and it speaks to that fear a lot of us have that we're not praying effectively, you know? Like, even when you're trying, are you doing it right?
100%. It's easy to feel like your prayers are just going out into this void, But the source made this point about God already listening. And honestly, that's kind of a game changer when you really sit with it.
Right. You're not trying to get his attention. You're already in his presence.
Exactly. But then, if that's true, why do we hold back with those big, audacious prayers? You know what I mean? Like, why not go all in?
Well, and that's where the whole boldness thing comes into play. It's not about manipulating God. It's more like the size of your request reflects the size of your faith. How much do you trust him to show up?
Ooh, that's hitting home already. Because, yeah, if I'm being honest, sometimes I DO aim low because deep down, I wonder what'll happen if he actually comes through with the big stuff.
Right. And it's those insecurities we all carry. Who am I to ask for something that significant? Or that fear of, what if the answer is no?
Ugh, yes. It's way easier to stay in the safe prayer zone.
Yeah.
But there was that James 4.2-3 verse, how sometimes our own motives are holding us back.
It's a powerful thought, right?
Totally. It's like we're putting God in a box.
Exactly. It's like we think he can't handle our messy, complicated, audacious dreams and desires, or that maybe he doesn't actually want to.
So we've talked about those prayer struggles, the fears that hold us back. But what does bold prayer actually look like when we try to live it out?
Well, the source used this really interesting example from the Bible, Abraham's encounter with God in Genesis 18. And it starts with God just showing up at Abraham's tent. Like it's a regular day.
A casual divine drop-in.
Right. And I think that's such a powerful reminder for us that sometimes those moments where God feels the closest, those moments of deep connection and revelation, they can happen when we least expect them, right in the middle of our everyday lives. The key is, are we paying attention? Are we open to seeing him?
But get this, Abraham's immediate reaction is to go into total hospitality overdrive.
Oh, I know. It's like, hold on, God, let me just whip up some snacks. We got drinks with that. A little something, something.
It's subhuman.
The best, right. But the source points out it's about more than just snacks. It's how we treat people, even in the mundane. Like that reflects something too.
That how you do anything is how you do everything, kind of.
Exactly. But then it gets even wilder because God tells Abraham that Sarah, his wife, way past childbearing years at this point, she's going to have a son. And Sarah, she left.
Well, yeah. Talk about impossible, right?
Right. But here's the thing. God doesn't miss a beat. He uses it.
Doesn't get offended, doesn't write her off.
He takes that moment and he uses it to show his power, his faithfulness. That's a big takeaway for us, right? Don't put God in a box based on what WE think is possible or impossible.
And then, this is where Abraham's prayer life gets really interesting. He starts bargaining with God over Sodom and Gomorrah, like actually trying to negotiate with God to spare the cities if there are even a small number of righteous people there. He goes back and forth with God, keeps lowering the number until he gets to 10. Talk about taking prayer to a whole new level.
And, what's so key there, Abraham's being bold, but he's not being arrogant. It's not about demanding or dictating to God. It comes from that place of knowing who God is, that he's a God of justice, absolutely, but he's also a God of incredible mercy. And Abraham knows he can come to God with this bold request because he knows the heart of God.
He's not afraid to have that real talk, even if it seems kind of out there.
100%. Bold prayer. It's not about forcing God's hand. It's about coming to him with those open hands and open heart, ready to go there, even with the hard stuff.
Okay, so we've got this awesome example from Abraham, but what does this look like for us now? How do we take this ancient story and make it, actionable today?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And one thing this source emphasized that really clicked for me, it's that the size of our God, it should determine the size of our prayers. It's about that shift, moving away from can God and more into he already has.
Ooh, I like that. It's like we're trading in those rowboat prayers for aircraft carrier prayers. But I got to be honest, that whole expecting those answers thing, kind of intimidated.
Right. The source talked about how it's not about treating God like a vending machine where we put in our requests and then, boom, guaranteed outcome on our schedule.
So it's not just the size of the prayer. It's like the posture of our heart while we're doing it.
Exactly. It's about moving from that demanding to trusting, from transactional to relational. And that takes that deep, unshakable belief that God's not only able, but he's willing. He's willing to move mountains on our behalf. Remember that verse about if you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer.
Matthew 21.22. That's the one.
It's about plugging into God's power, not just our own effort,
And that takes guts.
It does. And sometimes it takes a whole lot of patience, too.
Oh, tell me about it. Sometimes it feels like God's clock is on a whole different time zone than mine. But, the source mentioned that too, that bold prayers, they need that bold patience.
It's so true. He's never late. He's just working on a different scale. Look at Abraham, right? God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars, but he and Sarah, they waited decades for their son, Isaac.
Talk about a faith test.
Exactly. And even then, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Sometimes that answer to our bold prayer, it's a whole journey, not just an instant arrival.
So we've talked about praying those bold prayers for our own lives, but this source also talked about the importance of praying them for other people.
Absolutely. It's like when we're praying for others, especially those big, impossible-looking prayers, it takes the focus off us and puts it right where it should be, on God's power and love.
It's like those bold prayers, especially for other people. It's a good reminder of who's really in charge,
Absolutely. And the source even brought up Abraham again with that, how he wasn't just praying for himself, he was going to bat for Sodom and Gomorrah, which, talk about a wild place.
And that takes us right back to James 5.6, that whole earnest prayer of a righteous person thing. Like, it's kind of humbling, right? That our prayers, even for other people, can actually make a difference.
It really makes you think about how God uses us. He gives us a part to play in his plan just through our prayers. That's powerful stuff.
It's like we become these conduits or something, channeling God's love and power to the people who really need it.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And it brings us back to the heart of this bold prayer idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being arrogant or demanding. It's about aligning ourselves with what God wants.
Yes. It's about really trusting his character, going all in on faith, even when it's hard or doesn't make sense.
And being brave enough to embrace the whole journey, trusting that God's timing is part of the plan.
Because it is.
So to wrap it all up, it's not about yelling our prayers or trying to make God do what we want. It's about shifting our perspective.
Yeah.
Moving from that can God to he already has.
Mm-hmm.
It's about praying with this confidence that comes from really knowing who we're talking to, really trusting that he not only can answer our prayers, but he wants to. He's excited to.
Yes, exactly. This whole conversation, it's like this call to action, to move beyond those safe, predictable prayers and step into this whole new realm of faith, believing in the impossible, trusting God's timing, praying for others with the same boldness we bring to our own lives.
Because the truth is, the size of our prayers, it should reflect how big our God is. And let me tell you, that's pretty big. This wasn't just about upping our prayer game. This was about stepping into this deeper relationship with the guy who created it all, who holds everything together.
It's about aligning our hopes with his plan, trusting that he can do so much more than we can even imagine.
And that pray big, expect bigger idea. It's not about trying to drum up this superhuman faith on our own. It's about tapping into the source of all faith. It's about realizing that he's already there, he's already listening, and he's ready to move. So are you ready to stop playing it safe and start praying audaciously?
That's the question, isn't it?
Because I don't know about you, but I'm fired up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this encourages you to rethink what prayer can be, to come to God with this renewed boldness, these big expectations. And remember, even the smallest step toward bolder prayer could have a huge impact. Until next time, keep exploring, keep seeking, and keep diving deep.
You've been listening to the Clarence Stowers Leadership Podcast. Join us next time for more insights on becoming 1% better each day and leveling up in all areas of life.